Hidden away in the middle of Singapore's concrete jungle is Fort Canning Hill, a lowly mount that was the focal point of the island's early history. Originally known as Singapore Hill, it has a Keramat, or sacred tomb, which is said to belong to Iskandar Shah, the last king of ancient Singapore. However, according to the Malay royal chronicle, Sejarah Melayu, Iskandar Shah did not die in Singapore, but lived out his life in Melaka, where he started a new line of kings. So who is the king who lies in this tomb on Fort Canning Hill? And what secrets of Singapore's ancient past does it hold? Many history books tell us that when Sir Stamford Raffles came to Singapore in 1819, he found only a fishing village with no more than 150 inhabitants by the Singapore River. This is far from the truth. Raffles's letters to his friends revealed that near this village were the remains of a wall and fortifications that once protected an old city. The Englishman immediately identified this city with Singapura, a kingdom described in the Sejarah Melayu to be ruled by a succession of 5 kings, from its founder Sang Nila Utama to Iskandar Shah. British maps of the time show that this defensive line wrapped around the northern foot of Fort Canning Hill and ran towards the seafront alongside a creek that is now Stamford Canal. The fact that Fort Canning Hill was the center of pre-modern Singapore was affirmed by the 19th-century Malay ruler Temenggong Abdul Rahman, who told a story dating from the ancient times about the hill having a palace, and all men being forbidden to ascend it without its sovereign's command or summon. Behind this palace was a forbidden spring, where the consorts and the king's wife took their baths, and no one was allowed to approach. Accordingly, the Malay people called Fort Canning Hill, Bukit Laranagan, or the Forbidden Hill. John Crawfurd, who was the second British resident of Singapore, scaled the hill in 1822. During his hike, he came across the foundational remains of a structure that he thought was of a Buddhist temple, as well as the tomb that he was told, presumably by a native guide, held the body of a king named Iskandar Shah. Crawfurd connected this king with Iskandar Shah in Sejarah Melayu, despite its revelation that the latter's reign in Singapore was ended by a Javanese attack that forced him to flee to Muar, before he resettled in Melaka. Under Iskandar Shah and his heirs, Melaka flourished as a port city in the 15th century. But it was captured by a Portuguese fleet in 1511. Curiously, the European conquerors learned from the city's inhabitants that its founder was a Javanese prince called Parameswara, and not Iskandar Shah, who instead was said to be his son. Parameswara was reported to be originally a ruler in Palembang, just like Sang Nila Utama, and he also moved from the Sumatran city to Singapore after a failed revolt against his overlord in Java. In Singapore, Parameswara murdered its local ruler to seize control of the place, before a Siamese army put him to flight again. He escaped to Muar, before continuing to Melaka, following the route Iskandar Shah was recorded to have taken. Given the Sejarah Melayu's origin as a Malay court genealogy, it is tempting to assume the Portuguese got things wrong. However, Parameswara's existence and his relationship with Iskandar Shah are independently confirmed by the annals of the Ming dynasty, which recorded not only Parameswara's diplomatic relations with the Chinese emperor, but also Iskandar Shah's visit to the Ming imperial court in 1414 to memorialize his father's death. Therefore, it is certain that Iskandar Shah was neither the last king of Singapura, nor the ruler buried on Fort Canning Hill. The Sejarah Melayu stated that Sang Nila Utama was buried after his death on the hill of Singapura, which is Fort Canning Hill. Accordingly, some historians believe the so-called tomb of Iskandar Shah actually contains the remains of the Singapura founder. But why wasn't this recalled by the Malays in Singapore in the 19th century? It is equally striking that the Portuguese did not describe the Singapura ruler disposed by Parameswara as an heir of Sang Nila Utama, or even a king, but an official and son-in-law of the monarch of Siam, who bore the title Sang Raja Singapura, meaning the noble ruler of Singapura. Apart from Sang Nila Utama and Iskandar Shah, none of the Singapura kings are mentioned in any historical literature outside the Sejarah Melayu. How sure are we then, of the narrations of the Singapura kings in the Sejarah Melayu? Is there a hidden ancient history of Singapore we need to uncover, before we can finally learn who lies in the sacred tomb on Fort Canning Hill?